Hey, everybody.
Hi.
How are y'all doing? I was floored by Lyman's presentation, I have to say. I have been so lucky to be able to work with that guy, and my approach, my process as a director is sound first, and then everything after. And so, being able to work with somebody who, Lyman's personality in the studio is like, he's a man of very few words. He is a guy who likes to show, not tell, and so he'll be like, "Hey, well, let's check this out," and then he'll play this thing, and you're like, "What?" But the thing that you missed, that you get in this room, that you can only get in the theater or when you're actually working on the project in the, what do you call it? The sound? What? The sound room? The room sound. The studio. Yeah. Is that the speakers are all around you, and one of the things that Lyman does that is so great is he really understands immerse you in a world through sound, so that his sound design will envelop you. And if you ever have a chance, he also is a musician. Like, if you have a chance to see him actually truly strut his stuff live, you should definitely take advantage of it. This is a guy who just has this unique genius, which is why I wanted to work with him in the first place. But actually, my follow-up project to Fugitive Dreams was written, the sound part of it, it's heavy on sound design, and I wrote it specifically for Lyman to sound designing because I loved working with him so much on Fugitive Dreams. So anyway, I feel so lucky to have witnessed this presentation. So anyway, that's my cold open, and my name is Jason Neulander, and I have been in Austin since 1993, when I moved here right after college, and to actually found a theater company here in town called Salvage Vanguard Theater, and I ran that theater company for about 15 years, and in the process of running it, we were devoted exclusively to developing and producing new plays, and new, edgy, weird, experimental plays for the most part. And over the course of my time there, I directed 50 theater productions, and really kind of got my chops up as a director. And one of the projects that came out of that was this radio play called The Intergalactic Nemesis. And this thing, like KT became like a big supporter of it, and they ended up broadcasting it, and it spawned a couple of sequels, and we would do it live as a live performance. And it kind of developed an audience to the point where the Paramount brought us in to do a show there, and it sold out the Paramount. And then I got it in my head that maybe we could bring it. This is so not really the topic, but this is my background, so I'm going to give it to you anyway. So maybe we could bring it to Broadway. And we got some Broadway producers interested, and it looked like it was really going to happen. And then the Great Recession hit, and it kind of collapsed. And my career was in the shitter, and I was like freaking out and trying to figure out what to do, when I set up a meeting at the Long Center, basically to beg for a job. Like, I could fundraise, I could do marketing. Like, I was like, just give me a job in your office. And Cliff Red, the guy who ran the place at the time, was like, we're not hiring, but it was very overwhelming. I was moved to tears, actually. He said to me, I think you're too talented to work in our office. Why don't we put the Intergalactic Nemesis in the big hall, which is a 2,400-seat theater? And I could just run the math on what the ticket sales of that would be, and I was like, oh my God, if we sold that out, that would truly financially save me. And so, but I felt like it was too big of room for the intimate experience of watching this radio play being performed, particularly because one of the really interesting things about watching the radio play was watching the sound effects being created. This goes back to me as a sound guy and how important sound is within my work. And then in a flash, it hit me that if we had a screen the size of the proscenium arch we could create a comic book version of the story, and then we could project the artwork from the comic book on the screen, panel by panel, without the word balloons, while the voice actors did all the characters, and the Foley artist created the sound effects, and the music was performed live. And I kind of just threw that out to him in this meeting, like, what if we did that? And he goes, well, we just bought a cinematic projector, and we're looking for reasons to use it. So all of a sudden, my life changed. And we created this, and it played the Long Center in its premiere, and 2,200 people came out to see it. And then, like 10 days later, I'm at what's called a booking conference, which is where shows and agents representing shows set up booths, and venues go up and down the aisles. It's like a sales conference where they're like shopping for what they might present in their next season. It's people from all over. In this instance, of this particular conference, people all over the Midwest. And I went in with the hopes that maybe we could book like one show, and that might pay for the booth that I purchased. And anyway, when I was showing video of the show and telling them the numbers, we ended up booking a 25-city tour. And what happened with that project is it ended up touring the world for 7 years. Wow. And the result of that was we ended up getting on Conan O'Brien and getting all this media attention. This is about 10 years ago or so. And that led to all these meetings with like tentpole production companies to potentially make this project into a tentpole movie. But little did I know that we were at the beginning of the era of the 3 S's, which is, I don't remember what they are now. It's scares, supers, and sequels. And so since my show was none of those 3 things, nobody picked it up. My dream, ever since I was like a kid, was that one day I would make movies. And so I realized that the magical fairy godmother of movie production was not going to wave her magic wand over me, and so that I needed to go ahead and try to make a movie myself. And so, which is kind of what I did with my whole career anyway, which was just kind of come up with ideas and try to find a way to like find people who would pay for it and then make it. And I had some pretty good luck with all that, so I decided I would do that. And I realized like the time had come in 2016 was when I was like, it's now or never. I just got to do this. And so at that time, this was this August of 2016, I was on Facebook and finding myself kind of nauseated by all the vitriol that was happening in the comments of what seemed like every single Facebook post around the election. And I did 2 things. One is I got off social media completely, which I still am. And the second thing that I did was realize that I needed to come up with a project that was about love and forgiveness and maybe grace and compassion. And so I went back to these plays that I had directed years before, some of my favorite plays, and just kind of reread them to see if anything sparked an idea for a movie. And one of those plays did spark an idea for a movie. It was a play called Fugitive Pieces that I directed back in 2002. This beautiful, beautiful play about these homeless people trying to make their way across America in this utterly strange and surreal and scary and dangerous world that they occupy that has no empathy at all. And so all they have is each other. And it's this funny love story that is a platonic love story about our capacity to love. And when I finished reading the script, I found myself, I was crying. And I was like, this this is the film. So the first thing I did was contacted this actress, April Mathis, who I worked with before, who moved to New York, and they won a couple of awards. And I called her up and I was like, hey, April, I have this idea for a film. I'd love you to star in it. And she said, send me the script, and I did. And the next day she called me up and said, yeah, I would love to be in a movie version of this. And then I got in touch with the playwright and asked her if she'd be okay with me adapting the script into a movie, and she was cool with that. And so that led me to, okay, now I'm going to do this. And I had all these skills that I developed through doing theater. Like I was a director, and I had become a writer. I kind of backed into being a writer. And I was a producer, and my favorite part of it is the collaborative part. I think years and years and years ago, I read this thing back when I was in college. This book about directing movies, and it said the director's job is to get out of the way. And what they meant by that is that when you bring in your collaborators, hopefully you get these people who you have who you really respect and love their work. And so your job as a director is to let them be their absolute best. And of course you share your vision with them, but then once that happens, you just try to remove as many obstacles as possible for them to do their job the best they can possibly do it. And I felt like, that's kind of what I tried to do in theater, and maybe that's what I could do also with a movie. But to get there, what I needed to do was a couple of key things. One was to find a way to translate the vision that I had up here into something that I could share with people so that we could have a shared vision. So part of it is I'm a pretty articulate person, I think, and I can describe the things that are important to me in a project. But also I felt like it was really important in this movie to have visual references. And also, in this film, sound would be an exceptionally important component. While I'm not a sound designer myself, I knew that one of the key sound elements was the music, and there are songs in this film. And so what we did was I picked this amazing songwriter who became my lead composer for the project. His name is Nate Hamilton. And he's this kind of roots songwriter here in town. He's incredible. And I asked him if he would just write I already had the lyrics because they were from the play, the music for this one song that we used. And we did this workshop this was in May of 2017, where I was having a really hard time. There was like one thing that always kind of had bothered me in the play script that I wanted to figure out how to fix it in the movie. And it was, so I brought 3 of the actual cast members, flew them to Austin, and then got a couple local actors, and we kind of workshopped around my kitchen table to try so I could figure out like I knew what the problem was, trying to figure out a way to fix that problem. And so, but we had April in town, and so I got arranged time with her to get together with Nathan in his studio, that's the word studio, and he and she recorded like a demo version of this song. And then what I did is I went on the internet, and I knew I wanted the film to be black and white, and I knew I wanted it to be 4:3, like the classic Hollywood, like old-timey 1930s and 40s size of the screen, that kind of square shape. And I knew that the biggest influences from that aspect of the film were classic road movies, like The Grapes of Wrath, and also The Wizard of Oz, and also newer road movies, which happen to be black and white, like Down by Law by Jim Jarmusch. And so I found these photographs, and with the photographs and the song, I put together this kind of demo montage to try to get people interested in the project, and it looked like this.
Burn my dreams on a wayward sea. Let them drown, oh mercy me. Ashen ghosts on a pine bluff tree, hanging still, oh sorrow be. Oh mercy me, let down my dreams on a rope of light in a raw smoke heap. Oh mercy me, let down my dreams on the twilight's vine in the river deep.
Okay, so with that video, I was able to get people to actually get interested in putting money into the film, and I was able to get my primary collaborator, or cinematographer, Peter Simonite, to sign up on the film. And I hope some of those images kind of stick with you from that, because I'm going to show you a little bit of footage later from the movie. And I actually hadn't watched this little demo thing that I made. I hadn't seen it in years, and I watched it again for the purpose of this presentation. And I was a bit shocked at how much our movie actually looks like that. It's just kind of remarkable. So the next key piece of the puzzle to put this film together was going to be figuring out what the locations were going to be. This movie had something like 57 individual exterior locations in the film. And a friend of mine was working on the project, who was one of the co-producers, who's a veteran filmmaker, was like, with that many locations, you cannot start too early. Like, this is going to be much, much harder than you think it is going to be. And I took his advice very seriously. Basically, the day he told me that, I was like, all right, we're going to start looking for locations. And I got in touch with a few locations managers in town who pointed me out some things. But also, part of it was just driving. And so I would just drive out east, west, north, south from Austin, knowing that we were going to shoot locally, but knowing that we were not going to shoot anything, like I didn't want any of the film to feel like it was in Austin. In fact, what I really wanted to do is make it feel like we were in locations that were like not even in Texas. And so, like on this one day, this is just amazing. The end of the film, at the end of the film, there's this poppy field. And there are these moments where the film goes to color, like, from black and white, like The Wizard of Oz. Like you saw, actually, Lyman showed you one of the color scenes in the film, and also black and white footage. And so, but the key location for the end of the film was this poppy field. And so I'm driving out. I don't even, honest to goodness, I think we were maybe doing like a family road trip to I don't, maybe my wife and I were driving to Marfa is what it was. And it just happened to be the right time of year where this wildflower seed farm that exists out in Fredericksburg, it happened to be the time of year that their main advertising, which is this enormous field of poppies, happened to be in bloom, which I discovered after the fact that poppies basically are in bloom for like 3 weeks out of the year, and that's kind of it. So it was this incredibly lucky moment as I was driving by. I was like, maybe that's our poppy field. So one of the things that I learned from Peter Simonite, our cinematographer, was the location of the sun was going to be absolutely essential to the success of the look of the film. And Peter, actually, when I interviewed 3 different cinematographers for the project, and Peter brought in this whole lens package with him to show me how our film, that his vision for our film was going to look. And he had these, I mean, I'm going to get in the weeds because it's nerd night and we can be nerdy, like a brand of lens called Cook, so Cook lenses, and they were new lenses, but they were designed to look like lenses from like classic Hollywood days. And so, so he's like, he brought his like a still camera, like a camera that you take photographs of. But he attached some of these lenses to it just to show me what it would look like if the movie looked like this. And truth be told, at that point, I didn't know enough to know what even I was looking at. But I was like, if this guy is going to be like this guy, and he got it from the Dorothea Lange photograph piece, and he also got it from the Robbie Mueller cinematography piece, because 2 of the biggest influences on the project, particularly in terms of to use a really overused word that's used now too much, the vibe of my film was going to be along the lines of kind of late 70s, early 80s independent cinema in the vein of Wim Wenders and Jim Jarmusch. And it turned out this guy, Robbie Mueller, was a cinematographer for both of those directors at that time. And so, so Peter sold me on him shooting. And what we did is I drove by this place, and I was like, holy crap, this is not going to be here forever. I got to get back here with Peter. And so like so we got in touch. I got in touch with the owner of the poppy field farm, and he's like, yeah, you can come over and take a look. I'll have to show you around. And we show up, and this like total redneck guy, like redneck, comes up in his like gas-powered golf cart thing to us, and he's like, "You're not here to make a porno, are you?" And I realized later, of course, he was joking, but at the moment, we both of us were like, "Oh my God, what have we gotten ourselves in?" Like we were scared. But he was really nice, and he brought us out in his weird porno-y way. He was really nice, and he brought us out to the field, and we got to look at it, we got to run through it, and we got actual B-roll footage, and Peter shot on 35mm film for this. And it's footage that actually ended up in the film. But one of the things we realized that was so great about it was that, like, the best, easiest place to shoot from in the field happened to be facing due west. And so, because the sun, I don't know if you all know this, but it goes east to west as the day progresses, we realized that, like, in the afternoon, and this is important to understand, what we were using the sun for when we were shooting was actually not front light to light the actors' faces, but backlight to light them from behind. So we always wanted the sun to be behind, on the other side of the camera, like camera, actor, sun. And so, so we were like, oh great, we've got like a perfect place where if we were to like show up here at noon, you know, we could be ready to shoot by, 3, and we could, basically shoot all day until sunset. And what we really wanted to get was like this. We knew that ending was going to be like kind of that moment right before the sun actually set. And so, as we were doing, and this was a year before we shot the scene, because as I told you, the poppies only bloom for 3 weeks, and our shoot was, so this is how early I was starting to look for locations. That's the long and short of it, with the sun path in mind. And so thinking about, okay, if we're going to shoot in a place in the morning, it either has to still work for us in the afternoon, or there has to be an easy, what's called a company move, to go from the one location to the next location. So, oh my gosh, I think I broke that. So not only were we thinking about like, okay, each location has to look right for each scene in the movie, but we also need to be thinking about the logistics of getting from one location to the next. For example, we can't have one location that on the same day in Bastrop as in Fredericksburg, because it would just take too long to drive from one location to the other. So these like logistics were part of the consideration, and I'm like learning on the job. I've never done this particular thing before. Thankfully, we had a long lead time. So as Lyman said earlier, one of the key locations in the film was a train. And truth be told, and another key location was train tracks, because there's scenes in the film where characters are walking along train tracks. And I knew, because of this horrific story about this cinematographer who a train was coming through and they hadn't secured permission to shoot on this rail line, and her gear was in the way of the train, and she ran to save her gear and she got run over by a train. I knew that I did not particularly want that to happen on my side. So I was like, we can't just, kind of guerrilla shoot, go out there and just guerrilla tactics, try to steal this location. Like the train tracks, forget the train itself. The train tracks, walking along them has got to be done correctly. And somebody told me that Cap Metro, and this is the coolest thing, owns, like, you know how they have the Metro Rail line? Well, they are planning ultimately to run that line all the way from like Elgin all the way out to, I don't know where the lines end up exactly, like well past Cedar Park. But there's like rail line that the city, the Cap Metro actually owns, like way outside the city limits. And what it's used for mostly is there's once, during the daytime hours, once a day, a freight train comes through that and rents it from Cap Metro. And then at night, freight trains run continuously on this rail line. And if you live near the rail line, you know, as I do, when those trains blow their whistles like at 2 o'clock in the morning, that's actually Cap Metro's rail line that they're using. Not the one along Mopac, that's different. So, turns out, so I got in touch with Cap Metro. I just cold called their main line and got their switchboard person and was like, because they still use a Cap Metro. And so,
no, they don't.
No, they don't. I got what is in modern parlance is known as a receptionist to pick up the phone, and the receptionist was like, "Oh, so you want to be connected to our film and television liaison?" And I'm like, "What?" So it turns out Cap Metro had just, like maybe 6 weeks or 2 weeks or so, like right before I called, had just hired somebody to be the connection between them and anybody who might be interested in shooting something on their rail line. And it turns out that I was the very first person to have ever called them. So this guy was absolutely amazing. And we took an entire afternoon, and he took me out east, and he was like, maybe this location could work, or this. Like, he didn't know. And I knew a little bit. I knew what I wanted it to look like, but I wasn't 100% sure what the best option would be. But over the course of the afternoon, we became friends. And so he was amazing. So not only did we suddenly have access to all of this rail line, but then he says, hey, there's this nonprofit that uses our rail line out west to do train rides for like families on refurbished old passenger cars. And maybe they could, he goes, are you interested? Do you need to actually shoot on a train? And I was like, yeah. Because the plan for the train car scenes was we were going to rent a like heavy-duty pickup and then rent like a flatbed trailer and build a set on the flatbed trailer that would look like a boxcar. The dimensions were roughly the same. And then we'd find some private road somewhere where we could then just drive this thing back and forth for the train shots. But all of a sudden, we maybe could actually get a train. So I made an appointment with the executive director of the Austin Steam Train Association. And it turns out they're up in Cedar Park. They've got this whole rail yard, and they had like 2 boxcars that they had never used before for anything. They were literally using them as storage sheds. And she was like, maybe we could, you know what we could do for you? We could build you a train. and we could, so what we could do is we could build you what's called a combination train. And that would be, we could put a locomotive, we could do 2 boxcars, we could do a couple passenger cars, and a caboose. Would that work for you? And I was like, I mean, we have a limited budget. And she goes, well, we could do it for free. So I mean,
You're in.
Yeah, I was in. And okay, so what we found out was that, so this is the deal that we worked out. So it required Capital Metro to give us access to the rail lines for the purpose of shooting on a real train. It required Austin Steam Train Association to be able to put together this training for us. Oh, the deal was it wasn't quite for free. Their volunteers had to be in the movie. And they are in the movie. There's one of my favorite scenes in the film where a body, a corpse, is thrown off the rail. And these guys are the people who throw the corpse off. And it's but the sound design in this scene, visually it's stunner. I mean, it's one of the publicity stills that they use for the film. But the sound design in it makes it, when at the end of this scene, the train crew people go back into the train, and a few of them go back up into the locomotive, and there's this metal door on the locomotive. And the metal door closes, and all of the sound, I mean, Lyman and I really bonded on this. Like, I'm a huge fan of oh my God, David Lynch, thank you. Huge fan of David Lynch. He does all of his own sound design. And in his early films, the sound design, it's like his aesthetic is to create, my film doesn't work this way, but his aesthetic is to, like, the sound doesn't feel like it's part of the environment. It sounds like it's layered over the environment. And I'm not sure quite how he does it, but there's a really weird quality of the sound design in his films, particularly like if you go all the way back to like Eraserhead, like where and it's so cool. So anyway, when they get back into the locomotive, the metal door slams shut, and the sound of it, particularly if you see the movie in the theater or in a good sound system in your home, it will make you jump out of your seat. I mean, it is just freaking loud and scary. So anyway, so now it was, we coordinated with them. Now we had to get permission, I'm not making this up, from the federal government to be able to do this. And so we're kind of waiting for the Transportation Authority, you know, whatever the United States Transportation Authority, I don't remember what the name of the governmental entity on the federal level is, but they had to okay us doing this. And they did, with the caveat that we had to take a train, like a rail safety course, which is actually required. And the reason they required it is because we would be shooting with the opening of the boxcar door open to the outside. And so this was potentially extremely dangerous. Like, if the train's in motion and somebody accidentally, steps backward, outside of that thing and falls the wrong way, you know, the train weighs like 20,000 tons or something like that. I mean, trains are crazy heavy, and they would be dead. And so we took it extremely seriously, and the video that I should have thought to get the video so you could see this for yourself. The opening shot of the video in the rail safety course is an actual footage from like some kind of security camera of a car sitting on a rail crossway, you know, across the tracks, and a train like cutting it in half. And this is not CGI, it is real. And they did it to scare the fuck out of us. And we got scared. So, two things. One, to run a boxcar, it's actually illegal to run a boxcar on a rail line with the door open. So we were like, okay, how do we deal with this? And the Austin Steam Train Association, like their technical guy, was like, what if I just take the door off? Then the door's not open because there isn't a door. And
Don't tell the attorneys. Do not tell the attorneys.
So they cleared it with the federal government, and they said, okay, yeah, that works. If there's no door, that means the door can't be open. You're cleared to do it. So that's how we did it. And then the actors actually had to be tethered, or everybody inside the boxcar had to physically be tied to something inside the boxcar to make sure that there was absolutely no way that anybody was going to fall out. And so we're shooting the very first day. The way we set it up is we had 3 days to shoot on the moving train while it was in motion. And then we had a week where we could shoot on the boxcar while it was in the rail yard, like just sitting on track, not moving at all. And so I'll get to how we use that time in a second. But on the very first day that we're shooting in the moving train, Robbie Tan, who plays the lead actor, and April Madison, down. So one thing I realized, like I had scenes where they were walking, and we couldn't do those. Like I had to rearrange that. Like so, every scene in the box. There's a couple of exceptions where we cheated with where we put the camera, so you don't actually see outside the train, so we could shoot where the car was not actually in motion, where they walk. But most of the scenes, I mean, you wouldn't really necessarily notice this, but there's a reason they're not moving. It's because they are literally physically tied to where they're sitting. And anyway, the first day, we're like, we set where Robbie is, we set where April is, our grip like puts in the metal rings to hold the aircraft cable that's connected to the harness that they're hooked up to, you know. And Robbie like sits down in the spot that he's directed to sit in, and maybe, I don't know, 2 hours or something into shooting the series of shots that we're shooting with him sitting there, he's like, can I get up? And we're like, of course, what's going on? He's like, this ring is like sticking up leg, it really hurts. And we're like, what? Why didn't you say something? Like, we could have moved the ring, we could have moved you, like, you didn't have to, oh, poor Robbie. So that was a fun lesson to learn. And so, anyway, so I want to show you, I think these are the nice photos that I have. Yeah, okay. So, this shot here is like what you're seeing outside is the actual outside, and I'll show you this scene, how we cobbled it together in a second, but I want to show you stills to really get in the weeds on this for a second. So this is actual train in motion. So this is one of the 3 days that we had to shoot on the moving train. Then, when we cut to this shot, we're actually in the rail yard with the train car still. And what Peter Simon and I figured out, we did some tests on this, is he literally had his camera operator just a little bit jiggling the camera to give it that feel that the camera had when the train was in motion, just a little bit of bobbling, so that you had this sense of motion. Then we set up special fans, very, very quiet, but very powerful fans that would blow the actor's hair, or there was some hay in the boxcar, blow that around a little bit to get that sense of motion. And then we had PAs with giant tree branches with leaves on them, like moving them so that the shadows would continue to move across their faces to create a consistent set of motion. But this shot that you're looking at here was actually shot like a day or two after the other shot that you saw earlier. And then in this shot, this actually was on the moving train, this one, because the camera pointed in this direction was like it was an easy camera move, and we just did it that way. And then this shot here, again, we're in the rail yard. So, but one of the fun things about this little trick, I'm going to go back a little bit to this shot right here, is that when we were in close-up on Scott, who's this very menacing character in the film, I told him to whisper the entire scene. And Scott was like, but like, why would I whisper? Like in real life, we'd have to shout over the noise of the train. And I'm like, this is the beauty of making a movie, because we can manipulate sound in all kinds of crazy ways. And I promise you that no one watching this film is going to be like, wait a second, it's completely unrealistic to me that he's whispering right now. But by whispering, it created this like sense of, I mean, just this get under your skin menace to this scene, which...
He sure did put me in mind, Johnny. Kept his eyes bowed down just like you. Looking for pennies? Folks would call out. Looking for knives? You'd say. Johnny.
Hey, Johnny.
So that's how that scene got cobbled together. One of the other things that then, so, you know, you think about movie making and all the like publicity stills that you see for movies or what they're doing on set. But the reality is that being on set is the shortest part of the process. Like, so it took me a year to write the script. It took me another year to raise the money. It took me a year then of pre-production to find locations and hire the crew and all that stuff. And at the end of the day, I think we had like 25 people on the actual crew, plus another probably 15 people on the various aspects of post-production, plus producers, plus cast. And then after, it was like another 11 months of post-production. And when, I think for the lay person, I don't know, I did anyway, I always thought of post-production, it's like when you're done editing the film, you're kind of done. That's actually not true. The editing process is half of the time of post-production, and the other half of the time of post-production is adding all the sound elements, adding the score, adding any visual effects at that point, because you don't have visual effects because you don't have visual effects shots twice. And every time the camera cuts away from what would be a visual effects shot and back to a visual effects shot and cuts away and back, a single, each one of those cutback twos is an individual visual effects shot. And so I thought, when I hired a visual effects person, that we had maybe 20 to 30 visual effects shots in the film total. But what we actually had was 70 visual effects shots. And so that actually had a huge impact on our timeline because it takes time to do each one of these things. So we ended up having to hire a second person to help out with that. So, and visual effects, like, I'm not talking about like people flying into outer space and lasers. Like, it was, we had, because of the limited amount of time we had in the moving train, we had 2 scenes in the film. One, we knew that this was going to be the case, where we did it at the opening of the door against green screen, and so we had to do, you know, the backgrounds for that. And then we also, what else? Oh, and then at the end of the film, some magic happens, and so to make that work, that was all a series of visual effects shots as well. One of the visual effects shots in the film, and it's many people who've seen the movie have told me that it's their favorite scene in the entire film, is where the main female character, Mary, she's kind of disappeared from the story a little bit. And the scene that Lyman showed you earlier, where John's in the woods looking for Mary that you don't know if it's real or not, that is that section of the film where she's disappeared. And then we get back to her. But when we get back to her, she has this, I think this is a good word for it, epiphany. And I mean that in the spiritual sense as well, like that, maybe primarily. And so, so she baptizes herself. I mean, she doesn't say that, but that's what happens in the film. She goes into this body of water and goes all the way under the water. And it's nighttime, and we needed a full moon, and we needed a starscape behind her, and it needed to look absolutely real. But there was no way that we would be able to shoot that in real life, because even if we somehow could figure out a way to shoot this nighttime shot on our budget, and I should be clear about this, nighttime shots in film, as a general rule, is crazy expensive. And what is expensive about it is the time it takes to set up the shots, because to make you believe that there's night and you're in an environment means you have to see the environment behind the people. And to see the environment at night means you have to light the environment at night. And that takes a lot of lights and a lot of generators for the electricity for the lights, and a lot of crew to set all that stuff up, and it's crazy time consuming. So the movie Mad Max Fury Road actually was a game-changer film in terms of how nighttime shots are shot. And you should go back and watch this movie just for this element of it, because it's so cool. What they did was something called day for night shooting. This goes back all the way to the beginnings of film. Day for night shooting is where you actually shoot the nighttime scenes in the day. And what you do is you put a filter on the lens of the camera, a blue filter for color, to make everything darker and give it a blue tone. And the best day for night shots don't ever show you the sky. And then you add the sound elements of the crickets or whatever the nighttime sounds are. And all of a sudden, you, the viewer, often don't even think about the fact that this nighttime shot was shot during the day. But what makes it easier, much easier, is that you don't have to worry about lighting because the sun is doing the job for you. And so with Fury Road, this is so cool. They shot it, out in the Victoria and Albert Desert out in Australia. And they have miles and miles and miles of desert in the background in these nighttime shots. It would be literally impossible to shoot that during actual night. Like, you could not get that in frame. I mean, nowadays maybe somebody would create some visual effect to create the background, maybe, but the idea for that film was to get him in camera, and the idea for my film was to try to get him launching camera as well. And so what they did in that film was they shot it with that blue filter on the lens. This is one of the coolest sections of the film, and of that film. And then they replaced the sky with star sky. And you watching it would have absolutely no idea. So in our movie, this is that scene where she gets herself in the water. And so the reason it looks a nighttime tone in the black and white is because the filter is already on the lens to give it that night. But I want to point, let's see, my laser point. Yes! Okay, right here, see that reflection? That's the reflection of the sun. But see what you don't see in the sky over here? There's no sun. That's because the sun is actually kind of over here, lighting across to mirrors that are set up here to reflect the sun into the water. And so it's just day, and this is the period where we're shooting the poppies, so this is the end of April 2019. And then what happens is we add our night sky. Isn't that cool? And then in the closer medium shot, again, and you can see, and this one is cool because you can see the mirror. It's out of focus, but that's the mirrors. And then we add in nighttime, and it looks like that. One thing I want to point out actually between these two that I think is really cool, and it's another person on our post-production team, Mark Gregg is in the audience here, essential component of post, the color grade. And what color grade? We're in black and white. What do you mean color grade? Well, what a color grade is it's setting the color tones that you're looking at. And there's this actually a really cool website if you want to really geek out on this called moviesandcolor.com where she breaks out scenes from movies into their Pantone colors so that you can get us, and you see how a really good cinematographer really understands how colors work together, and a good production designer and the whole team. And so in this we're black and white, but we wanted to make sure that April's body had three-dimensionality. So when you go back to the daytime uncolor graded shot, look how dark her body is. She's silhouetted against the sky. But we actually shot the film digitally, and we shot it on these cameras called Arri Alexas, which get an enormous amount of color information into the chip. And so we actually shot in color and then converted it to black and white after the fact, but all that color information was still in there. So what Park could do then, and look carefully at her body when I make this transition, see how he draws out the side of her body that's towards us and brings out the three-dimensionality of her body? That is Park Gregg doing that work. So, So that's kind of the nerdy, super nerdy component of, getting into the weeds on how a movie is made. And then if you remember that demo montage thing that I created with the song, and then, so the movie finally came out, and it came out just in time, we finished it in December of 2019, and then I don't know if you guys remember this, it was a small event really, then COVID happened, and so all the film festivals that year were virtual. In other words, there were no in-person film festivals. And we got into some amazing film festivals that nobody actually went to. You could see the films on your phone, I guess, at home. I mean, it was the most saddest, the most depressing experience I've ever had after, at that point, 5 years of my life devoted to this project, to not have it go up in front of an audience, particularly with all the work we had done on the sound. Because no one except me has surround sound for their home television, and I knew nobody was going to actually hear this movie the way it was intended. And also because when you stream things, they get compressed, the visuals of it, so you have this thing called banding happening when you were watching. The movie didn't look or sound the way it was intended. It was very depressing to me. And also, the indie film industry utterly collapsed. I mean, the film industry kind of collapsed, but the indie film industry really collapsed and has never recovered. And so that's why there's so few new, interesting, independent films in the theaters now. I don't know if you guys have paid attention to this kind of thing, but the only movies that are out there are these big budget films and there's very, very few artful movies for grown-ups that get released in the theater. Very, very few. Like maybe 10 a year, now. It used to be totally different. So I was worried we'd never even get distribution at all, but we did end up getting a distribution deal, and the film actually premiered. You can stream it, and it premiered about a year ago, which was when Nikki actually got in touch with me to do this, and then scheduled a blah. So a year later we were doing it. But we're 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. People really seem to love it. I encourage you to see it if you're into weird and beautiful things. And I don't want to toot my own horn, but it's a very pretty movie to look at, and a moving film as well. And so anyway, and this will give you a little bit of a sense. And think back to that demo thing, because it really is in the DNA of this film.
I'm not having sex with you.
I'm not having sex with you either. I used to tell people I was from France. Sounded like a good place to be from. All those songs, you know?
That's Mary.
What?
My name. Mary.
Dead. Lost, maybe, but not dead.
All right, and that's my presentation on Sticky Joke.
Oh, you didn't go over at all.
No,
20 minutes on the dot. Perfect.
I thought there was that thing there to remind me. Sorry about that.
We're all in.
Yeah. No, I didn't see anybody leaving the room, so I think we were all very, very interested. So, any questions for Jason?
Would you do it again?
I would do it again in a second. I felt like I was born to do it. I mean, I loved every minute of it.
What's next?
I'm actually back in the theater space right now. I'm developing a new show that'll premiere at the Paramount Theater in 2026 that is along the lines of what we did with Intergalactic Nemesis, the comic book art and the live performance, but an adaptation of Treasure Island. So I'm really excited about that.
Oh, I did want to mention, if you go to austin.nerdnight.com, our video archive does include 2 talks by Jason and one by Lyman as well. So you can see more about Intergalactic Nemesis.
Well, and Nikki actually created
2012.
one of the sound effects gadgets that we use in the Intergalactic Nemesis called the Amazing Mogwai. Made all kinds of weird, like, sine wave tones.
Yeah. Thank you. We do have a question here.
Hi there. So, most of your film is shot in black and white, and that's kind of an old technology, but it has so much magic to it. why did you choose to go with black and white for this film? And what's special about it? If there's something but why was that choice made?
For me, it was about paying homage to this classic era of Hollywood cinema. There's a little bit of a kind of, in a small way, it's a movie about movies, in a small way. And but I also felt like the black and white would give that sense of bleakness and desolation that to me was so much a core of what the locations were so much a character in the film also. And I also wanted to do the 4:3 formatting of it for the same reason, but also because I wanted to create, when we went to color, I wanted that to really pop. And at the end of the film, it goes to full widescreen. And it's only been shown this way once, but AFS Cinema screened it, and they did it exactly that. It was 4:3 until the end when it popped out to full CinemaScope, and it was like, oh God, it was magical. Again, Park Gray was essential to making that happen as well.
Yeah. Okay, one more question.
Quick one, thankfully. You said it's in streaming. Where can we watch it on streaming?
Oh yeah, like Apple or Amazon, you can rent it, and then also on Hoopla, which is the program that is connected to libraries, you can stream it for free. So, but I encourage you to pay for it. It doesn't cost very much money, and
every little bit helps.
Yeah, every little bit helps.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Round of applause.